Sunday morning. I just wanted to share a word with you this morning. I was sitting here last night and God just impressed upon me to read the story of Hannah in the Old Testament, which is found in 1 Samuel. And if you're not familiar with the story of Hannah, she was a woman who was barren. She couldn't have children. And her husband was married not only to her but to another woman named Peninnah, and Peninnah had children, and she would taunt Hannah because Hannah was barren, and that just increased the pain that Hannah felt. And I was just reading through this story last night, and I was just weeping because of several different reasons. But the story is not only a story of a woman who was barren, but to me, as I read this story, I get something so much more out of it, I guess. Possibly there's something that you are waiting on, something that you are dealing with right now, and this could be your story. And so I just want to kind of go through this, and it talks about how Hannah, she was so bitter of heart, and she went up year after year with her husband and Peninnah and her children to the temple to worship and to offer sacrifice, and her husband felt so bad for her. His heart ached for her that he would give her a double portion of the food that was there, so that she could maybe feel a little less sad. And he said something that kind of made me laugh. He said, "Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" Well, that was well-meaning, but when you're searching, you're seeking, and your heart is aching, maybe for a child or maybe for an answer to a prayer, someone else just doesn't replace that. Even though they mean well, that just doesn't help. But she goes, and it says that once they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up, and she began in bitterness of soul. She wept much, and she prayed to the Lord. And she made a vow, saying, "O Lord Almighty, if you will only look upon your servant's misery and remember me and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." So what she was saying here was, "Lord, please hear my prayers. I am aching. I am hurting here. I am empty. My arms are empty. I am longing for you to answer this request." And she was pouring out her heart. And it goes on to say that Eli, the priest, actually thought she was drunk because her mouth was moving, but no words were coming out. She was praying so intently. And yet she tells the Lord that if he will honor her request, if he will give her this child, that she will dedicate that child back to him. So it made me think, what are we longing for? What are we seeking? What answer are we looking for? And as we pour our heart out to God about that answer, as we seek him, are we going to in turn give that back to him? Are we going to give glory to him when he does answer? Are we going to turn that over to him for him to do even more incredible things out of it once he answers? And so we have to ask ourselves that. And she kept her word. But at first it says that, Eli, the priest, came to her, and after she explained to him her trouble, that she was so sorrowful and she was seeking the Lord, Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." And she said, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Someone came along and encouraged her. Eli came along and encouraged her by saying, "You know what? The Lord hears you. He hears you, and he's going to grant this request." And so are you an encourager to other people? Do you have encouragers in your own life that encourage you? And it says, early the next morning they arose and worshiped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. And it says, Elkanah, which was her husband, lay with Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son, and she named him Samuel, saying, because I asked the Lord for him. And so the Lord made good on his promise. He gave Hannah the desires of her heart, but it wasn't immediately. It says that in the course of time, sometimes our prayers take time. Sometimes we don't have the answers that we need right now. Sometimes it takes a while, but God is faithful. God is faithful. And so it says here that he gave her a son. And she says she named him because I asked the Lord for him. What are you asking the Lord for today? Are you going to honor him that much when he gives you that answer? You know the Lord is faithful. And it says, it goes on to tell how Hannah, she held up her end of the bargain. She took Samuel after he was weaned, and she brought him to Eli the priest in the temple, and she left this little bundle of joy there with the priest. She gave him back to God for service for his entire life. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could leave my child with a stranger to raise. But yet Hannah prayed for this child. She asked God for this child, and God was so gracious, and he gave her this child. And then she held up her end of the deal, and she gave him back. So my question to you is, what is it that you're asking for? What is it that you are seeking from the Lord? And when he answers, are you going to give that back? Are you going to give it back to God for him to do even more? And are you going to give him the glory that he deserves? That's the message that God gave me today, and I just wanted to share it with you. So have a happy Sunday. This is the Lord's Day. Thank you for listening. All right, bye-bye.